Hey everybody, Mark here. Today we're going to be talking about mixing 808s, and we're going to be doing this by going through a track that I'm mixing that was produced by Colormind. My first tip, don't compress your 808s. When you limit and compress things, you tend to make things smaller. They lose punch. They don't feel as big as you think the compression is going to make them feel. Yeah, sometimes you need compression, but a lot of the times when we're using saturated 808 samples, the compression tends to make them feel smaller. And then when you go into the mastering and you start limiting your tracks, that compression becomes exaggerated and things tend to sound even smaller and have less impact. The next thing, and you hear me say this a lot, EQ is one of the most powerful tools that you have in your tool belt for mixing. You're gonna see in this track that I'm actually gonna add low end to the 808. And I do this because the higher notes in the part that's being played are fine. There's no balance issue there. But when the low notes hit, I do feel like I need to add some power to the lower notes of the 808 part. Now, I do use my reference track, and the reference track that I'm using is Thank You Next by Ariana Grande. And when I listened to that, I realized by going back to the track I'm mixing that the 808 sounds great as is. I don't have to do much. And in many cases, this is what happens because the samples that we use are already mixed for us. One thing that I did notice was that I did need more power on the low end, and I'm gonna show you how I achieve this with EQ. First, you're gonna notice that I take a low shelf, somewhere around 100 hertz, and I boost. Now, I highly recommend you doing this while the sound is in the mix. If you turn up the low frequencies until you hear the 808 swallowing up the track, well, that's too much. I generally turn things up so that I can hear what characteristic I'm boosting or adding, and then I pull things back to taste. Now you'll notice that once I do that, I pull the frequency down to somewhere around 50 or 60 hertz because 100 hertz is just too high. It brings up too much of the muddiness of the sound, and I only need stuff as low as 50 or 60 hertz. Now another great tip for 808s while mixing is widening. There's so many different wideners out there. You can use delays to do this, or you could use any of the hundreds of wideners that are out there on the market. The one that I decided to use is by a company named Matthew Lane. Now this is a very simple widener. It's only one knob. You'll see that I put it on, I turn it up, and I just land on something that feels not too wide, but yet wider than what it was originally. This is something that is purely subjective. It's something that I felt it needed, but if you gave this track to 100 different mix engineers, they may have widened it more, or they might not have widened it at all. The fact is, there's no rule. Just go with your gut. So remember, don't compress your 808s unless you absolutely have to. Use EQ first to add energy and make your 808s feel bigger and balance the frequency spectrum. And lastly, you can make your 808s feel even bigger by adding widening plugins. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Check out my website at markberrymusic.com, and also check out some amazing music and other great content at colormindmusic.com. Keep making great music, do what you love, and we'll see you in the next video. Take care.